Hi, this is Billie Beene here with a world news flash update. Today's date is June the 2nd, June the 3rd, 2024. Time about 9 a.m. in Texas. This is World News episode 169. Some of the things we'll be covering. Russia preps to nuke the U.S. NATO preps for World War III. Israel preps to attack Hezbollah. Some of my sources are God in the Bible, Patriot Subscriber, Israeli News Live, Hal Turner, War News 24/7, Breitbart, and a Hungarian journal. So now let's begin with what's happening in the U.S. Currently, the U.S. has Russian subs, 7 or 8 across our East Coast, 3 to 4 in the Gulf of Mexico, 16 along the West Coast. Now, these placement of nukes have happened since about May 30. And how Turner's analysis is, we have 16 Russian nukes off the West Coast because this would be closer to the majority of the U.S. silos, located in Washington State, Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Missouri. This is Georgia, and this is Florida and Georgia. So I believe these are the silo locations I received doing a U.S. nuke map. My speculation is there's a lot more silo locations than it is being shown publicly on the U.S. map. But we have these things going on. We have these placements. And we have a nuke silo location located 18 miles from Seattle, Washington State. Another large city located close to a silo, Denver, 77 miles. Kansas City, 55 miles. Albuquerque, New Mexico, 0 miles. Amarillo, Texas, 0 miles. In Georgia, 32 miles from Jacksonville. So we have that in place. Now, it was announced June 1 that the U.S. In Vandenberg along the West Coast, California, from their Vandenberg U.S. military base, is going to test 2 Minuteman III nuke-capable ICBMs, June 4 and June 6. It stated they will be unarmed. And so we have only silo-based ICBMs inside the U.S. Carry the Minuteman III. 400 of these Minuteman nukes are located. See, 400, and I was showing you a few silo locations. Inside the U.S., we have 400 Minuteman III ICBMs, nuclear capable. Each carries 3 warheads. So we've got that going on. And now we have, KSBY is reporting the 2 unarmed Minuteman missiles will be launched from Vandenberg, unarmed, June 4, and the time is 12:01 a.m. to 6:01 a.m. June 6 at the same time, 12:01 a.m. to 6:01 a.m. And now we have this coming out in Breitbart. Okay, currently in Madrid, Spain. We have a meeting going on of the Bilderberg group. And this is a group of elites that effectively control the world, including NATO and most major governments. That would include the US. And some of the people attending are NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg, European Council President Charles Michel, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, government leaders from Estonia, Finland, ex-CIA David Petraeus, who was also in the military from the U.S., Citigroup banking. So this is a meeting of elites that control the UN, WEF, WHO, and so on, and NATO. Their meeting is going on right now in Madrid, Spain, and the primary topics, one of them is war. And they absolutely want war right now. Now we have from France, Macron, the leader of France, also going to the Bilderberg meeting. The states, they're going to send French trainers inside Ukraine. And then France is going to send a brigade inside Odessa, Ukraine. That will follow. We have Germany saying they're activating 900,000 reserves. And all of these nations, and Slovakia, since that attempted assassination on their Prime Minister Fico, Slovakia that didn't want to get involved in this war, they're now sending equipment into Ukraine and possibly troops. So that's going on. Now, May 31 is when JB, the actor wearing a mask, masquerading as the President of the United States, made a secret that U.S. weapons can be used inside Ukraine to fire on Russia, as have many of these France has said Germany has said The deal is sophisticated weapons. The Ukraine military is not trained to fire them, so that would likely mean we actually have NATO troops inside Ukraine firing these missiles off deep inside Russia. Now we know they've recently taken out 2 to 3 over-the-horizon radars that are not used in defense of Ukraine, but would be used to detect NATO firing missiles from this area or possibly down in this area. We know off of Japan, the U.S., and the Chinese South Sea area, the U.S. has 350,000 troops. Japan alone, they have 23 bases. So it would be easy for them to send missiles into Russia from this direction. So we see NATO prepping for war with Russia. And we have this going on. May 31, JB, secret to use, U.S. drones fired from Ukraine deep inside Russia. And indeed, there was a strike recently, 1,200 kilometers or 1,000 miles into Russia, hitting an oil depot at Krasnodar. So that happened. We have a Bulgarian source, Objektivito journal, saying that Russia had put 11 Russian subs into the Atlantic. These are the ones I'm showing here. Now, I believe it was Hal Turner or another source who reported recently about the 16 Russian subs put in recently, in the last 3 or 4 days, into the Pacific. And that Hal Turner speculated it's because from the Pacific, it would be easier to reach a majority of the U.S. nuke silos. So, yeah. So, this Bulgarian source reports on May 30, 11 Russian subs into the Atlantic. And that was following the Ukraine attack on the over-the-horizon radar locations in Krasnodar called Tsar's Wolves. And Russian subs are carrying Bulava nukes, each with 10 warheads and a range of 10,000 kilometers. So, 10,000 kilometers, probably about 9,000 miles at least. And from the Atlantic, these Russian subs can hit Washington, D.C., London, Paris, Rome, and Berlin. Yeah, so that's going on. Now, today, from Hal Turner, Poland is rolling up to the border with tanks. Now, this refutes Poland and NATO's assertion that they're only sending in trainers. Well, if you're only sending in trainers, why do you need tanks? They're sending in the PT-91 tanks and says they're only going in to relieve Ukraine troops so they can go to the front. So that's going on. Yeah. And JB also signed June 1 secretly, and we know JB carries no political power. Nothing he signs is legal. For a full-scale war by the U.S. on the Houthis. And now we'll talk about Israel and what's going on there, because the U.S. and NATO are also prepping for war in the Middle East, and most likely China. I'll cover that in a separate report. So we have Israel, Gaza. Oh yeah, when this began about October 7, Gaza had a population of 2.3 million. It's now believed that population is down to about 1 million. And now we have Israel. We know we've got Africa, Egypt, right here, Suez Canal. And now I'll cover something that happened in 1967 when Israel tried to sink a U.S. Navy ship, the USS Liberty. And by the way, I have a Patriot subscriber whose husband survived the U.S. attack on the USS Liberty. More information is coming out. I'll link an interview by one of the survivors who's now coming out. And it was interviewed by Stephen Ben-Nun on Israeli News Live. And this is the story he's telling. The USS Liberty traditionally had been stationed around Africa. Suddenly, on June 8, 1967, they were given the order to go to the Mediterranean Sea, a place this ship had never been. And on June 8, we had Israel attack in unmarked planes the USS Liberty. Now, the USS Liberty arrived in the Mediterranean Sea about June 6 or 7. And during those days, Israeli marked planes were flying over the USS Liberty. So this made-up story that Israel mistook the USS Liberty for an Egyptian ship is not plausible, not believable. And then on June 8, in unmarked planes, they began an attack about 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and they continued it with planes, with subs, shooting torpedoes. This went on for about 10 to 12 hours. By the grace of God, the ship did not sink. 34 were killed, 174 wounded. Now, what was the reason behind the USS Liberty being in the Mediterranean Sea on that day? This was a plan by the U.S. President Johnson and the Israel Prime Minister Moshe Dayan, with their orders from the deep state, NATO, to bring about World War III. The plan was for Israel to sink the USS Liberty and then blame Egypt. During that time, on June 8, the U.S. had en route tactical nukes. They were coming around the edge of Africa, and they were going to nuke Egypt to bring about World War III. Now, I submit this is what we are seeing now being set up and prepped by the deep state-controlled NATO in Israel, in Russia, and in the South China Sea. So that's going on. Now, today, yesterday, Israel had a secret cabinet meeting. Intel from Hal Turner about going full-scale war on Hezbollah, located in Lebanon. Now, we see the deep state with this fake trial they just brought about of President Trump. It's now coming out that the jurors in President Trump's trial in New York City were pre-selected and interviewed by Alvin Bragg and his office and Judge Merchan before they were ever put on the jury list and selected. Yeah, that's going on. So at any rate, the deep state is losing in the U.S. They absolutely must stop President Trump from being formally elected to his second term. Many of us believe he's in his second term, and this will technically be his third term. So that's going on. So they're setting up now NATO, and I believe June and July are the most dangerous months for the U.S. as well as the world, because this deep state-controlled NATO has to get World War III going. And so we see Israel secretly talking about going full-scale war on the Hezbollah. We see also the U.S. talking about going full-scale war on, this is Saudi Arabia, Oman, Yemen. The U.S. now, another deep state-controlled move by J.B. the actor, for the U.S. to go full-scale war on the Houthis. Now, in the last few days, the Houthis have fired on several commercial ships, plus twice on the Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier group that we understand is now in Saudi Arabia, allegedly to have repairs done. Now, there had been a story come out that on June 4 and 6, the Eisenhower was going to launch nuke practices with nukes, live nukes. I have no verification for that story. But what is more realistic is the U.S. military will practice unarmed Minuteman III launches from Vandenberg on June 4 and 6. It has nothing to do with the Eisenhower. However, within the last 24 hours, JB has signed okay for the U.S. to go full-scale war on Yemen. Now, in the U.S., under our Constitution, only Congress can put forth war on any situation. JB doesn't have the authority under our Constitution. Now, what's going on in Israel is they've had 500,000 leave who say they're not coming back. I also had a word from the Lord later in October after the alleged attack that if you want to live, get out of Israel. So we see 500,000, according to Hal Turner, have left, and 80% don't plan on returning. We also see a GDP down 19%. And we see empty shelves appearing with the Houthis' effective blockade of shipments through the Red Sea. So that's going on. Now, we have this. Yeah. So in the 1967 Israeli war against Egypt, Syria, Jordan, that lasted from June 5 to 10 of 1967, Israel's leader was Moshe Dayan, and the U.S. leader, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who gave a stand-down order for the USS Liberty after they were attacked. Both President Johnson and General McNamara gave stand-down orders for the U.S. to go to the rescue of the USS Liberty. When the ship did not sink within 24 hours, they finally liberated the crew. They had to sign non-disclosure orders and not reveal that it was Israel that tried to sink the USS Liberty. Now, we have many U.S. ships now in the Mediterranean Sea. And I say to the U.S. military in the Mediterranean Sea, heads up. And we know in October and early November of 2023, when many of the U.S. ships went to the Mediterranean Sea, that's when a coalition of the naval captains said, we're only going to take orders from President Trump, who they recognize as commander-in-chief, when it comes to using nukes and above nukes. So that's going on. Now, yeah. And we have Sunday, June 2nd, the Houthis now are putting mines out around Yemen to keep the U.S. and UK amphibious landings from taking place. So this concludes my flash. It's war, 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 brought about by the deep state via NATO. I love you, and I'll see you soon.